Our planet has lived its wonderful, happy life. The logical situation is getting worse, and the person falls for such things, being subjected to that kind of influence. This is how it will happen, and this is how it is happening. They understand that sooner or later this will happen to them. No matter how much they want to live here, no matter how right and righteous they live, they will still face their death. Yes, we had periods in time when our earth was flourishing, and now it is in decline. Why? Because it is the Creator's design. The Creator's design is for there to be an era when everything perishes. Nothing will change. Our planet will die.
Anton, in your interviews, you have mentioned your tradition and the name of your spiritual teacher mentor more than once. There were the following comments on this topic. My tradition, my tradition. He said it dozens of times. But what is this tradition? Why doesn't Anton mention the name of his teacher and the parampara anywhere? So that no one can check if there is such a student with the right to teach others. In Hinduism, anyone who speaks on spiritual topics always openly names the teacher's name, not just Ashan. This is probably the main thing that doesn't inspire trust. How would you respond to this statement?
I've also said many times why I don't express this in words. What I'm showing is not Hinduism. It's a branch of Hinduism. And this branch is called Sri Vidya, and it has never been open. It has always been a closed system of teaching. I simply don't have the opportunity to speak to a large audience about those details, especially the name of my teacher, which cannot be disclosed. At the same time, those people who have practiced with me, those who have trusted me, some of them have already met my teacher. It cannot be spoken. At the same time, those people who have practiced with me, those who have trusted me, some of them have already met my teacher. They have no doubts anymore. They are already absolutely. They were convinced that what I was telling them was true. And they continue to practice. They have confirmed that it is all real.
How does this, let's say, sacred information affect the students? Will this knowledge or lack of knowledge reflect on them? For example, on their karma, on their path, on their soul, their experience?
In the life of a person who engages in practices, only reflects his achievements in practices, his personal mastery. A person can know a lot of information and still be infinitely dissatisfied with their life. Therefore, those practices, the system that I propose, are not aimed at filling your head with some other information. It is aimed at giving a person the opportunity to free themselves from the constraining processes they are in. And this liberation comes through energy. That is, when a person finds his energy, finds his hidden possibilities. They learn to tap into these potentials, to bring them out from within themselves and apply them in everyday life. That's when changes happen. Just throwing information into someone's head usually doesn't yield any results in any science or tradition.
So it turns out that this is absolutely unimportant, unnecessary information?
Out of curiosity, why not? But this is not the kind of information that changes a person's life.
There is such a comment. That's pretty much what Buddhists say. Every person, when they open their mouth, is only talking about themselves, or so they think. Our efforts to know anything are in vain. In reality, we only know our own thoughts. Do you agree with this statement? Is everything around us a projection of us and our thoughts?
The primal cause of everything knows itself. Every person is a part of the original. So, in a sense, he also knows itself. Reality is constructed in such a way that a person's internal state is the cause of external events. So, through external events, naturally, any person comes to know themselves, and it doesn't matter at all whether he realizes it is or it isn't. That's right. That's how it happens. A person can make a decision their whole life, brushing off this fact and shifting their responsibility onto the idea that there is great injustice, that the world is somehow not right. Basically, what is he doing? He says that he is smarter than God. He is smarter than the Creator. So the Creator created such conditions and he does not accept them.
If we all create and project this ourselves, then why are only a small number of people satisfied with their lives?
Because it's much easier and more tempting to do nothing. It's just plain simple to justify your laziness. And when a person starts justifying their laziness, there's no end to that justification. He can blame everything around him. He can sincerely believe that the beast is better than a human. He can sincerely believe that our planet, which is the only one filled with life for light years, is somehow wrong, that something is off with it. If a person gets carried away with all of this, then naturally he will be dissatisfied. But it's very easy to do. For that, you don't even need to get up from the couch. But if a person starts with themselves, then suddenly it turns out that the work is never ending. And no one will do this work. But if a person starts doing it for themselves, then their life begins to change. And in most cases, change for the better in relation to the person themselves. And that's why there are very few people, those who can really start changing themselves, working on themselves, are very few. Isn't it easier to just be lazy and justify your time?
What do you think is the key difference between those who create and get what they want, and those who can't create and don't get what they desire?
All the differences lie in the reactions of the person themselves. Just recently, I witnessed one of the millions of stories that passed through me. And I was a direct participant in this story. It needed to be done. A 3D model, in order to print it on a 3D printer. To do this, a person needed to learn the program that allows you to create 3D models. And the person starts learning the program. He asked me for advice, and I said, well, learn SolidWorks. The person starts learning, but they don't like this program. Nothing is working. And I said, well, then switch to another program. There are other programs that are more user-friendly, with simpler interfaces. And to that, the person says, no, if I started with this program, I will finish it in this program. In the end, the model that could have been created in the program that I know, which I'm familiar with, could have been modeled literally in a day. In one day, and to use my suggestions, because I understand this simple program, the program that the person chose has been 2 weeks now, there are still no models. And this person continues to be angry, continues to torment themselves, to spasm, to hate the whole world. The hedgehogs were eating cacti and crying. Why do it like that? And when I approach this person and say, listen, it's been 2 weeks already, maybe you should switch to a simpler program, or at least to the one I understand and can help you with. To which the person replies, I've already spent so much time on this. No, I'll finish this. And at that moment, the person even forgets why they started doing all of this. He needed a 3D model. He didn't even have to master a professional 3D modeling program. He just needed a model. And this internal pride, this internal position, this reaction to the problem that has arisen, that no, I will do this, leads to the fact that there is still no result. Look at how many people maybe say, yes, I spent a couple of days mastering this program is too complicated, I'll try another one. And then spend a couple more days trying another program. How many people can say, okay, I tried to achieve my result this way and that way, it didn't work, so I'll try another way, I'll try a third, a fourth. How many of those people are there? Actually, there are very few. How many of those people are there? Actually, there are very few of them. Mostly it's the person where they say, no, this is impossible, and just stop doing anything at all. Or they start banging their head against a closed wall, even though there's a window and a door right next to it. And both are open, and so the ability to be flexible, the ability to be adaptable, the ability to be without this inner pump, without this pride that nobody needs at all. No, I'm going to keep fighting. You, of course, will keep fighting, but what's the point of that? None, just problems.
Where does this pride come from?
To some extent. Again, I can say that it comes from laziness, from that inner human laziness, from greed. Why from greed? Although it's not obvious. Because the person feels sorry for their time. Here he thinks that he spent several days there. I put in some invaluable effort. Well, that's already too much. It's never too much. We are by nature infinite. Can anyone imagine a situation where our Creator, the prime cause of everything, that being from which everything was created, and then they'll say, yeah, no, I'm tired, I'm leaving. It's impossible to do it that way. The entire reality goes along with it. Or the original, they'll say, well, I've already given too much, I won't give anything to anyone anymore. That doesn't work either. He keeps giving. It's a continuous process. The nature of the original is infinite. And the nature of a person, like its particles, is infinite. But people don't remember this and even don't want to agree with it when someone reminds them, because this inner greed, this inner consumerism doesn't allow for actions and deeds. Actions and deeds. It's always about giving. Even when we work for money, no one pays your salary before you do the work. They just promise you that And you kind of agree. But what if you need to do something that you won't get paid for? So it turns out just like that.
And how do you get rid of this pride?
To act, to sacrifice, to give, to help. And gradually the skill is developed. This won't happen in a day, it won't happen in a second, it won't happen just once and last a lifetime. No, it becomes a part of the life of the person who teaches themselves to give. I'm not talking about giving away your last shirt like it says in the Bible. That's madness in the modern world. I'm talking about giving what you have in excess, what you have in abundance, what you can do, what isn't a financial burden or a mental strain for you. You can do this, you can develop it within yourself. And when it becomes normal for you to be not just a consumer, but also a source, then you open up opportunities for yourself to receive more. But first you need to give. That's how reality is structured. That's how the universe is arranged. You give and things come to you. You stop giving, you only pull for yourself, and it starts to drain away because you start to vibrate in a way like a limb, like an ending. Constantly within yourself. That's it. Here's the reason.
There are a few comments on the topic of spiritual development and vegetarianism. Some consider it compatible, while others do not. Yeah, they preach Vedic beliefs and eat meat. You can't say anything, well done. Vegans are so stupid. If you think eating meat is a sin, then don't eat grass either, because it's alive too and you're killing it. They showed up in a strange world with rules where there are predators and herbivores, and they spout their nonsense about how to live here. You are guests here, and you have no right to tell anyone how to live. Anton, you eat meat, and at the same time you are quite spiritually developed. And judging by this, one can conclude that giving up meat and animal products is not a mandatory condition, let's say, for enlightenment. But why do many gurus and teachers then refuse such food and switch only to plant-based diets?
And what happens to those gurus and teachers later? They are realizing the light body, they are transforming their body into pure energy. No, they age and die just like everyone else. It's an obvious fact. We live in a world where we are forced to carry death within us. And only an endless hypocrite and a highly unconscious person might claim that if they give up meat, then he stops that death in himself. No, he doesn't stop it, he carries it just the same as before. And the fact that he doesn't accept this, it only speaks to the limitations of his ability to perceive reality as it is. When I perceive reality as it is, I see that even a seed in an apple that I accidentally bit off, together with the flesh, also wants to live. And it strives to live and it seeks to realize itself, and it is saved. It is saved within my body. But he can't do it, and it perishes. And after that, dividing the world into what I understand, that's alive, and what I don't understand, that's not alive, is just madness, plain and simple. I accept myself as a bearer of death. Sooner or later, death will come for me, and I too will have to dance this dance with it. And this cyclical nature of life and death is a reality that we live in. And if let's move away from man and just look at the world. As it is without man's participation, everything is the same there. Constant consumption of one another.
Can we consider veganism as part of humanity's spiritual evolution?
I can say this much, that there are practices prepared for which eating meat is not recommended. It's not recommended not because it's bad, but because when you start to stir up certain energetic processes within yourself, then energy processes, it would be better for your body to be completely hungry. It becomes very difficult for you to stir up that energy. Living in such a state, it's not really possible, especially if you're in a big city and in society. That is, for certain periods of time, yes, you can take a vrata, you can refuse food. For example, there's the green diet, and there are diets based on pure water. And they can be performed for conducting some kind of ceremony or practice. Step out of it, please. You can continue to consume whatever you want. And moreover, I can say this. When the question of transitioning to the body of light, to pure energy arises, then it's not that you don't need to eat. Then even breathing becomes unnecessary. And here are the people who practiced with me, the people who came to The last course that we recorded, Live on Air, they even reached those states where their breathing would stop. It just became unnecessary. Yes, to achieve this state, I had to practice for weeks. But it's real. And when you reach that state where you don't need to eat, you don't need meat, you don't need this or that, don't create any problems for yourself. No. No one forces you to consume all of this. But if you haven't reached that state, then giving up all this nourishment won't push you towards that state at all.
If we consider the fact that everything is alive, just in different forms, then it turns out that even vegans cause some destruction. So, to maintain unity, do we need to feed on prana? Are there really prana eaters, and what is your view on this?
There are definitely prana eaters. I myself went through these practices. Even before I got into the tradition, I was doing some self-activity, so to speak. And yes, I went through these practices. A person can absolutely live without food and even without water. But then the question arises, why? For what? That's too little to receive the spiritual revelations that one seeks consciously or unconsciously. Every person, that's too little. Yes, from the outside it looks like some kind of great achievement. But in reality, with a relatively healthy body and iron will, this can be achieved in 4 days. That's it. And no matter how much it may seem like a great spiritual achievement, in reality, it's just a certain feature of the body that we can take advantage of, or in some extreme situation, or just out of whim, but there's no spiritual development there. So, I played around with all of this. I lived without food and water, and I said, it's not really that effective. I started eating again, I started drinking again. I continued to look for practices that I now teach, and I found them, and they are much more effective than surrounding myself with bands.
One of your listeners is writing, Anton, that was amazing. Thank you so much for the practice. One moment caught my interest. When you were explaining about spinal recovery, you mentioned sexual energy. And can you tell me where to find it, how to understand that it is indeed that?
In a woman's body, sexual energy is contained in the ovaries, while in a man's body, sexual energy is found in the testicles. So that's where we find it. From there, we redistribute it and we can use it. Not only for creating new life, but also for maintaining and restoring your own body. It fits very well with this. It adapts well to the physical material body. So yes, a person can take it and direct it to the damaged areas of the body that need regeneration. I can't say that this is exactly it. It's absolutely enough. Specifically regarding this question, yes, I would still recommend doing some gymnastic exercises, that is, for the spine. After all, it needs to be put into motion so that the muscles and bones have the opportunity to move, still set in motion, so that the muscles can allow the bones to move. And the redistribution of sexual energy will allow everything to recover there. But gymnastics won't be unnecessary in this process.
What will change in a person's life if they unlock this energy?
His degree of freedom will change. He will become more free. He will have more opportunities, more maneuvers that he can perform by possessing this skill. Sexual energy can periodically influence a person's behavior. If he takes control of this energy, if he can redistribute it, then he won't find himself in a situation where only instincts are at play. He can also regenerate his body and restore it by managing this energy. He can increase his productivity. He can be much more effective in extreme situations than if he didn't have such an ability. And in general, this sexual energy is quite close to a person's everyday life. And not only can you derive pleasure from it, but also much more. It holds more possibilities than just experiencing an arcade.
How can unlocking sexual energy affect a person's joy areas of life? For example, will it affect his income?
If he earns money with his body, then it probably will have an impact. We don't have places to exchange sexual energy. Yeah, who am I kidding? There are these points for exchanging sexual energy for money. So if a person, if he knows how to trade his sexual energy properly, he will get money for it. The most primitive way, conversion. But on the other hand, if we still don't take it into account, the most base processes of transforming energy into matter, so a person who controls their sexual energy, it significantly boosts his productivity. He gains quite a lot of life energy, tone, and strength. And of course, if he's not just sitting on the couch, but actually doing something, meaning he's active, then in his activities, he becomes much more effective. and it pays off right away. So for example, if you redistribute your sexual energy correctly, then some difficult task can be solved overnight, for example, for the bottom. And if you waste your sexual energy on pleasure, then you won't even solve that problem in a week because you won't have anything left to solve it with. You won't have enough resources. And so the ability to manage this process, to consciously control it, and to redistribute that energy allows a person to be much more effective and quicker in the tasks they are engaged in. And here is the skill to manage this process, to consciously manage this process. The ability to redistribute that energy gives a person the opportunity to be much more effective and quicker in the tasks they are engaged in. If a person isn't doing anything, then that effectiveness won't lead anywhere. The same goes for me, for example, when I'm preparing for some major events. I refuse orgasms. Everything goes exclusively towards work, exclusively towards the process of transmitting knowledge. But when all my tasks are done, when reality has no more questions for me, and I've already fulfilled all my responsibilities, I can allow myself to enjoy. There are no problems with that.
One of your viewers is curious. Shiva Anunnaki has been sent back to Earth by the Galactic Court to correct his mistakes. There is such information. For those who don't know, Anunnaki, an alien from space who has a reptilian origin, Anton. How would you comment on that? It sounds like a fairy tale. It's a certain race of beings that has been described.
At least in my life, I've come across information about the Anunnaki and ancient mysteries. The flower of life is Melchizedek. It's Egypt. It's the pyramids. And it's those ancient traditions. Ice mountain, and so everything related to the Egyptian theme, I've come across all that information. Naturally, Shiva has nothing to do with human forms. Shiva is the original being, the primary cause of everything. No one can send him anywhere, and certainly not exile him there. But at the same time, Shiva is realized in everyone, absolutely every living being. Every person has it in him. Manifestation. Shiva is also realized in his avatars. He has 1,008 names. He has all sorts of manifestations. And when you read books, Vedic texts, Tantras, Puranas, Shastras, then in many stories he takes part both as an avatar who does not hide from nature and as an ordinary, let's say, person, no different from others, but at the same time being his embodiment. So, Shiva is a very multifaceted process, but fundamentally, he is the primary cause of everything. This is the original being from which everything else has already manifested. And if we talk from the perspective of another tradition, for example, Christianity, how does creation begin there? In the beginning was the Word. The Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is about Shiva.
The comment mentioned the Galactic Court. What do you think? Are there other civilizations in our material understanding? Can we communicate with them?
Well, definitely there are a huge number of all sorts of forms of life. Naturally, these various forms of life exist not only on the planet, the Earth, but there's a nuance. And the nuance is that for me, for my current knowledge about the material world, and right now I'm specifically talking about scientific knowledge, not about the spiritual, is not enough to understand exactly where all of this is located in space. Because if we operate with physical data, then there's, for example, a distance of 100 million light years. So light will travel to some point for 100 million years. I can't wrap my head around this from the perspective of energy. You can instantly move across such a distance. But where to move, in which direction? Will you still be in the space where our physical body is located? What are these dimensions, multidimensionality, parallel worlds? When I traveled, outside of my physical body, when I could leave my body on the bed, exit it with my energy and start moving, there was a straight line movement, continuous straight line movement. I couldn't even manage to fly away from the planet Earth. So you rise, rise, rise. Lose the ability to move and find yourself in a body. But if I was moving in jumps, teleportations, I've been to so many places, but there's no understanding of where this is physically because you teleport there instantly. So there are definitely a huge number of life forms, all sorts of beings out there. But I can't look at the sky and point out where they are because I don't know. I can't get there in a straight line. And when you teleport, how do you know where you've teleported to in relation to your physical body? Bodies, in a way.
Is our form of existence and being here meant to correct the soul's mistakes?
The soul has no mistakes. The soul plays games. One soul can have many physical bodies, and it has many physical bodies. The soul is a multidimensional entity. These are layers. It's not just one entity that is limited. Yes, she has a layer where she still is perceived as something separate. It's just its layer. It has layers where it is connected into a single whole. And when he practices practices that allow him to see these processes, then at first it seems like, yes, I've grasped my soul, and here it is, manifested in my body, and that's enough. But over time, if this does not stop a person, if he continues to study these processes, then it becomes obvious that the soul, there is also a soul, and that soul has a soul too. And this is a very multidimensional formation in which you suddenly discover that you are connected with all of humanity. And it feels like all of humanity has one soul. And if this doesn't stop you, you will continue to study this energy structure. Then sooner or later, you will simply see that your soul, it reaches all the way to the very original, to God, the Creator, to the primal cause of everything. And this is exactly what allows us to say that each of us is a piece of the original. These little pieces, they are so limited in their perception that it's not an obvious fact for them, but it is a fact. So in understanding your soul, to claim that it is being punished by something or someone here, or that it is going through some trials over there, or something like that. This right here, this is it. The intensification of colors, the drama that people love to draw. Yes, no, that's not it. It's just a game. It's a dance. In the beginning, it's just playing with itself. No one is punishing anyone there. There are just different spaces with different rules. In some spaces, we play by one set of rules, while in other spaces, we play by different rules. We play by different rules, and all of this exists in parallel and multidimensionally. When you dive into it, it's infinite, but when you want to stop it and step out of it, that's when true spiritual development begins.
Continuing on the topic, there's this comment, I just don't get it. Anton says in one video that there's no rebirth, we only live once. In this video, he talks about the wheel of samsara, that some jump from body to body. I'm a bit confused. Anton, is it correct to say that only some of us can intentionally reincarnate here again? And what about the few of them? And if the rest of the privilege is not given to them, then what's the point of their existence here?
I'm describing this situation from different angles when it comes to rebirth. We are a particle of the original. The connection to the original comes to us through the heart, through the bindu in the heart. If a person faces their death, then this connection is severed. But at that moment, a person does not fall dead. As a particle, it is no longer original, but just as a particle, it can still exist. At that moment, it transforms into an inorganic being, just into a cloud of consciousness that remembers, that is self-aware, and that can move. If this cloud of consciousness is trained on what to do next, naturally, it can sustain its life at the expense of other beings, living beings, parasitized living beings, and even by attaching themselves to their bodies. And so, those particles of consciousness that have undergone such training, that clearly know how to do this, can jump from body to body, but they are no longer part of the original. Those who are part of the original are truly alive. They will still face the process of interacting with their own death. And when interacting with their own death, the decision will not be made by religion, nor by me, nor by the one who is asking. The decision will be made by death itself. What will happen next to that particle with which it has come into contact? In most cases, in the overwhelming majority of cases, this is the end. If a person is especially untrained in anything, that's it. It's the end. Is it like your nail? So I cut it off and threw it away. And that part of the nail that was cut off has no relation to the body anymore. is like hair that has been cut and flushed it down the toilet. And that part, the cut part of the hair, has no relation to the physical body. In the flow, in the energies, the same thing happens. At some point, death cuts us off from the flow, and we are no longer that very particle that moves towards the original through its connections. This connection is severed. Yes, you are still within reality. You are still in the body of the original, but you are no longer a part of it. It's the same as a leaf that has fallen off a branch and landed on the ground. It is no longer a part of the tree. But if that leaf is trained, if that leaf somehow knows how to reattach itself to the trunk of the tree or to other branches, well, potentially it can still live for a while. And that's why I divide in my stories the dead and the living.
What's the point of intentionally coming back here for those who can do it?
You need to ask those who intentionally come back here. I can only speculate. And my guesses allow me to say a phrase out loud like, it's easy to parasitize here. Here, it's the living people who allow this. They allow it. In our reality, and indeed in the entire universe, it is practically unrealistic to do something without permission for it, without explicit permission or authorization, not in the sense that someone gives permission, but in the sense that some being can decide to surrender, to allow, to transfer rights over itself. Such a thing can happen if a being, any conscious being, does not transfer its rights, does not agree, does not relinquish its will. It becomes very difficult to do anything with that being. And now we are in the Kali Yuga, when people easily give up their free will. And most likely this is motivating those magical beings to be here. In this way, they sustain their existence. They live like this. They have no other way to access They simply don't have the original energy to the flow of consciousness.
How to preserve your freedom, your will.
Don't give it to anyone. For example, you go to the elections, what do? You cast your vote. It seems like a small thing. And then, when some kind of cataclysm happens, they ask you, did you go to the elections? Did you go? Well, that's it. What do you want? I chose myself. That is, these are the moments that are sometimes very common. But when you start to think about it, you get horrified at how often you give up your rights to some external, otherworldly systems. And it's also good if it's a human system of living people who just want you there. Exploit it cheaply or sell it there. Some nonsense. And it's a completely different story when you fall under the influence of dead systems that drain you and squeeze you dry. But you agreed to it yourself. And they won't face any consequences for it. And you'll just die.
One of your listeners left quite a detailed comment. Anton, good afternoon. What do you think about the fact that we are being poisoned with chemicals day and night? Am I supposed to see the positive in this? I'm breathing poison, my stomach is burning, my lungs are burning, and birds are dying all around. Or do you also see nothing, hear nothing, and won't say anything to anyone? Who am I, or nobody on this earth? Everything alive is dying.
It's dying, I agree. Well, if you read, you don't even need to listen to me. If you just read ice literature, it is written there in black and white, what era, what events. Right now we are in the southern age called Kali. And for this age, such events are meant to happen. Why? Because it's the Creator's design. The Creator's design is for there to be an era when everything perishes. And in the end, this era ends with an apocalypse. That's normal for this time. It's your right, your free will, to be outraged by the Creator's design. How logical is it to do this? In my view, it's absolutely illogical to go against the Creator's design. And there's no need to wait for the apocalypse. It's still a long way off. At least about 400,000 human years before that. And again, we shouldn't confuse things. Human years and years, gates. In some books, this is where the confusion comes from, by the way. In some books, the dates are given relatively. God. And they are not the ones that relate to humans. And in more accurate literature, in better translated literature, it's clearly stated that there is a calendar in human years. There is a calendar in the years of the Creator, and there is a calendar in the years of Vishnu. And these are completely different calendars. For example, one inhale and exhale of Vishnu is a whole life. Gates. One inhale and exhale of Brahma is 4 epochs of humanity. Epochs that span millions of years. That's why, if we count in human years, then the apocalypse is still far off. But the age of Kali has arrived, and this is how it should be. This is the Creator's design. And to resist this is simply to be insane, well, or uneducated. So what should we do? How should we act correctly, so to speak, according to the design of this era, to develop oneself? Yourself, and no other way. And only the one who develops themselves, only the one who saves themselves, gives the opportunity for those around them to be saved. Those who try to save someone else will not lead to anything good. And some modern religious books show what happens to those who try to save someone else. And what is striking about all this? That it happens not under the influence of any otherworldly forces, but is done by the people themselves. Some otherworldly forces, but it's done by the people themselves.
Continuation of the comment. Do you see the ecological situation in our country, in the world, as a troubling signal for our civilization?
The ecological situation is worsening, but I don't see any reason to worry about it. Because no matter what we do, it will still get worse. Our planet is already getting old, you could say. She lived her wonderful, happy life. And deeply ignorant people can now be anxious and nervous and make others feel anxious and nervous. Only deeply ignorant people. People who know at least something about periods, about cycles, they are well aware that this is how it will happen. And that's how it happens. Yes, we had periods in time when our Earth was flourishing, and now it's in decline. And this is her cycle, this is her time, this is her event. We are here. As long as this is our home. And even if humanity, for some incredible reasons, suddenly starts living in caves again and hunting, not on mammoths, but on elephants, nothing will change. Our planet will be dying. And no matter how much a person would like it, to be responsible for everything and curse yourself because of it, no, this is the Creator's plan. And these are cycles that are beyond human control. And what a person has the power to do is to save himself, to develop himself, to perceive the world as it really is, and not as it is made to be. Read the description on the nearest fence. Everything is much more multifaceted, multidimensional, and profound. And when there's an opportunity to be aware of all this, then all you can say about our planet is that everything is harmonious. And everything is according to the Creator's design.
One of your like-minded friends writes, a pure heart is the main thing. Each of us sets our own priorities in life. Anton, what is the most important thing for you?
Freedom. I've been striving to achieve it for 2/3 of my life. And I see no reason at all to give up on this intention. The most important thing for me is to gain freedom. That's what motivates me. That's what keeps me moving. And that's something I don't hide, I'm not ashamed of.
I don't betray. What advice could you give to those who haven't found themselves in this life yet? And until they know their values, which will help them find what is most important?
Amidst the vast amount of information, the choice of how to move forward involves making decisions, taking actions, making mistakes, or not making mistakes. To satisfy your passions, to take periods of asceticism so that there is contrast, so that the spectrum of perception is broader, the most important thing is to keep moving. That is, if a person comprehends the world by sitting in one place motionless, no lifetime will be enough to comprehend it. If a person comprehends life in motion through constant events, situations, relationships, interactions with the higher, interactions with the lower, and interactions with themselves, with their soul, then their rate of development increases so much that they can achieve everything in just one lifetime. What is basically possible to achieve here? And with a clear conscience and a sense of duty fulfilled, we can move on to further explore the multidimensional spaces.
Question: since billions on earth do not practice all the necessary practices, it turns out that the highest is so irrational and wasteful that billions of people created in this case are leaving. After death, are we just thrown into the furnace of the universe? What's the point of wasting extra resources, given the higher power's potential for consciousness and wisdom? The logic is strange. Anton, how would you respond to that?
To me, it's a strange logic from the person who wrote that comment. What prevents the Almighty from creating all enlightened beings at once? What's the point of this path to achievement? He is all-powerful. I just know why all of this is happening. Because the Almighty, the Supreme Being, is playing with himself. He writes an infinite number of scenarios in which he himself takes an active part. It's just that when the Almighty is in a human state, he doesn't remember that he is Almighty. When he faces his own death, which is also his creation, he doesn't remember what he originally is. And even when he shrinks, contracts, spasms, and falls as a tiny black crystal into the furnace of the universe, he doesn't stop being the original, he just still doesn't remember it. It's a game. It is an endless game where you can play any game. Path, development, degradation, self-retention. On one level, fluctuations. Whatever you want, that's what you're playing. There is only one being, and that is the original, and he plays with himself. If all people, all of his little pieces will suddenly become enlightened, and the game will end, everything will become clear to everyone. And we'll have to start the game all over again, or just sit and be bored, because I repeat, he is alone. There is no one else here. The only way to play this is to cut down the possibilities of your perception. So, when the original is realized in each person as a fragment, their perception is so severely limited that he doesn't even remember his nature. And there is only one moment. In this entire cycle of rebirth, embodiment, disembodiment, destruction, and creation. Just one. It's called Mahapralaya. This is that very moment in time when there are no more fragments, and when the original is whole again. And again, there is no one else but him. And then the game starts again. And once again, many of his little pieces forget that they are his fragments. And it doesn't really matter whether they spend their time trying to achieve, trying to regain that memory, or if they don't spend time on it and just degrade down to nothing, to the limit. I don't care at all, because then the moment of Mahapralaya will happen again, and the original will once again come together as a whole. This is his breath. This is his movement in space.
There is a widely known method around the world for determining a person's character and traits based on their appearance. It's called physiognomy. So, by micro-expressions, facial expressions, and features, you can almost precisely read a person. One of your listeners left the following statement. He has a crooked nose. This indicates that a person is prone to lying. How would you comment on that?
Very simple. I have a crooked nose because I got it. In my youth, I got hit on the nose with a stick while running around the yard with the other boys. That's all.
Physiognomy doesn't work here.
Here, it's about traumatology. And since when I was running around the yards in my youth, it was the end of the 90s, so the traumatology isn't very good. So the way he lived, that's how he stayed. I still have a deviated septum, both outside and inside. But it doesn't interfere with my life or my practice. Although I know that physiognomy exists, and in principle, there are some sound ideas there.
There is such a comment. When I tell people what plants or animals or nature's angels say and feel, people respond that it's a stage of schizophrenia, from which I conclude that human consciousness is very low. It can't accept another consciousness, different information. It's easier to label and put a tag on someone, but I really don't care. It's all the same to me. Anton, are we really capable of feeling plants and animals to that extent? What could this mean?
What could this mean about the fact that a person is capable of feeling plants and animals? Yes, we can do that. But I was a bit confused by the wording of the person who asked this question. The man insists that there are other forms of consciousness, and how dare they not accept them? People have other forms of consciousness. How dare he not accept those people who are also a form of consciousness? So basically, he puts the consciousness of plants and animals on one side of the scale, and he says that this needs to be accepted. And on the other side of the scale, he puts the consciousness of another person. Yes, there is another form of consciousness that one does not want to pay attention to. Attention. But for some reason, the phrase is structured in such a way that it needs to be accepted. I accept any point of view. I accept any form of consciousness. And when I hear about myself, it's pretty much the same. Such is the free will of another form of human consciousness. And this person has every right to ignore the consciousness of animals, the consciousness of plants, and the consciousness of another person. Why not? On our planet, there is room for everyone. And for people with different forms of consciousness. This is important, because when we start playing the game of who is worthy and who is unworthy, then in this game, we immediately forget that each of us is Mahadeo. Each of us is partially original. If, let's say, my neighbor, being Mahadeo, decided to play a game called I really don't care about anything at all, let him play. It's not a problem. I will play the game, gaining freedom, and I will not interfere with other particles of consciousness to play what they want. Otherwise, I will not see my freedoms, like of my own ears.
Is it correct to say that expanding consciousness expands possibilities? And we can create a person, let's say a superhuman, but how do we get there?
Well, yes, of course, we can. The main thing is not to get confused with the terms and to define what we call the expansion of consciousness. In the modern world, expanding consciousness implies the use of auxiliary means for which one can face punishment. At the same time, deep meditations can create even more interesting and profound effects, and there is no responsibility for that. Criminal, what does expanding consciousness mean for a person who is asking this question? If we're talking about me, then the practices that I demonstrate, the practices that I use myself, they expand consciousness. And people who train with these practices become much more successful, effective, satisfied, and happy. People who, even those who came out of curiosity, use these practices, stopping. They say no. No, we don't want to live like we used to. And literally just recently to me, one of the practitioners wrote, listen, I realized why I keep practicing. The man just came out of curiosity to see something like this. And I still practiced the budget and understood why this is a practice. I practice this to live the way I want. And this is a very correct answer, because it is precisely the expansion of consciousness that thus opens up all possibilities for a person, opens up the freedom for him to act as he wants. And at the same time, his actions are not dangerous for him or for those around him. These are very harmonious actions, very beautiful actions that bring a lot of joy to life. And these are all aspects of expanding consciousness.
What narrows our consciousness?
Reactions that are based on rejection and aversion. Every time we don't like something, every time we are outraged by something, every time we define something as unworthy, as forbidden, as unacceptable, all these reactions narrow our ability to perceive. So if we take more understandable words like hatred, resentment, malice, pride, jealousy, judgment, despair, depression, all these reactions narrow our consciousness. And there's a bunch of other stuff too. These are the most common ones that come to mind.
How can a person not experience all these emotions? Negative.
To learn to love, to learn precisely that. Don't wait until some beautiful female body is in you. These feelings will suddenly stir for a short period of time. And don't tell me fairy tales right now, like we've been together for 40 years and we still love each other. No, you don't love each other. You're just used to each other. You had love at the very beginning. Yeah, I won't argue with that. But then it all transforms into something already more understandable, mundane, and having absolutely nothing to do with real love. Well, if a person isn't waiting after all, when something stirs those feelings in him for a short period of time, because conditioned love is dead from the start. Today it stirs something, tomorrow it won't stir anything anymore. And when he learns within himself to maintain those feelings simply by the fact of his existence, it brings that feeling to the same level as one's own breathing. I am alive, so I breathe. I am alive, so I love. Who do you love? Yes, I just love no one and nothing. The same reason, why do you breathe? Because I am alive, not because I have a family there, not because I have children, because I am alive. And it should be the same with love. And by the way, in many traditions and religions, this is written in black and white. People just don't want to train it. They all wait for it to just appear on its own. And for many, life goes by, and for some, it appears for a month or two. For some, it lasts just a week, after which life goes completely off the rails. If a person starts to behave a bit irrationally at that moment, and some people start to train, and I'm among those people who started to train, to keep that state in my heart, to hold on to this love in your heart when nothing can knock you out of that love in your heart. No external situation, no irritant, no event. You hold on to it just because you are alive. That's when you manage to deal with all the other constraining and compressing reactions. You just see what you're doing to yourself. When you try, for example, to get offended, you see how you're killing yourself and that person you're promising to be upset with. When you feel down, do you see how you're depriving yourself? Viability. At that moment, you're actually suffocating yourself on an energetic level. When your heart is on fire, everything is good for you. And there are simply no such reactions. In everything, you see harmony. In everything, there is a piece of the original, and you see that you are the same piece of the original. That's everything that moves you. It's just a dance. It's a dance, diverse. Figurative, with all the possibilities, with all the circumstances, with everything that can possibly be imagined. It's a dance. And this dance, you are free to dance however you want, however you like. It's a very beautiful process.
The viewer writes, how did you walk at night through the cemetery and see a neon droplet rising from a grave? I lingered for a bit and then quickly flew away. As it turned out, it was a recent burial. How would you comment on that?
Before a person completely falls apart, how a conscious being, he has the opportunity to remain in his energetic body for a while. So we have a physical body, the body of the first attention, and an energetic body, the body of the second attention. When it dies, the body of the first attention, that is the physical body, that a person, their consciousness, can still remain in the same space where their physical body was for some time. Accordingly, people, when they find themselves in this situation, and if they were not prepared for this either morally or technically, if they did not allow it at all, in principle, such an event in their consciousness, they do not know what to do. They just don't know what to do. And it's quite common for them to try to somehow interact with their body that has already been buried, and they just circle around the grave. They don't understand what to do with it next. But where are they supposed to go? Where should they run? What should they generate? What should they strive for? It's all trained in advance. No one gets all of this for free at the moment of death. In general, it's a big misconception that, well, I'll live as I live, yes, but I'll figure it out during death. No, nothing will change. On the contrary, everything will become much sadder and more sorrowful. At that moment, that's why this happens. This neon droplet is that little piece of consciousness that was moving in its astral body, its energy body, in the body of the second attention. All the same terms apply. And most likely she was trying to interact with her physical body in some way. Naturally, it's in vain. The physical body is already done for. It has served its purpose. It's done its time. And the next stage will be when this neon droplet completely falls apart and the person will cease to exist entirely.
Can we say that this consciousness is perhaps somehow stuck between worlds?
We can certainly use terminology like it's stuck. In fact, it just doesn't know how to move between worlds. Well, there's no such information, no such skill. I can't say that there are some harsh restrictions or anything like that. You find yourself in your second body. If you've been cut off from the flow, then you can't go anywhere and you're stuck somewhere. No, you're stuck only because you're untrained, because you don't know what to do. And that's it. Those pieces of consciousness that are preparing for these processes, who understand that sooner or later this will happen to them, no matter how much they want to live here, no matter how much it's better and more righteous than not facing your own death anyway. And even I, as much as I practice, as much as I know all sorts of techniques for leaving this space, I know very well that leaving will still be in the embrace of my own death. So you won't be able to escape from it. So it's a matter of the skill of the person who found themselves in this situation. I don't know of any such restrictions. I don't see them. Please move wherever you want. The entire universe is open.
Why do some people see this while others do not?
Because some people allow themselves to do it while others do not. It's all very simple. When a person is passionate about something, he may not even hear the coins scattered behind him. When a person is not engaged in anything and is more contemplative, meditative, they can see things that were unknown to them just 10 minutes ago. And so, depending on how we distribute our attention, that's how we perceive things. If our attention, we're completely immersed in our daily life, in our inner dialogue, in constant chatter with ourselves, we don't see anything at all. Just nothing. And even if at that moment the person were to face, I don't know, Satan himself, they wouldn't notice him either, because he is completely immersed in his own very important processes. If a person stops these very important processes of theirs and still opens up their extrasensory perception, the perception of their consciousness, then everything around him naturally starts to enter that consciousness. The diversity of the world and all its surroundings for that person, and that's actually what meditation is based on. When you're told not to think, you're relaxed, you're contemplative, your gaze is somewhere beyond the horizon, unfocused. And at that moment, you begin to see much more than usual for your psyche, so to speak.
Anton, have there been cases in your practice where people discovered their superpowers?
Of course, all the time. Actually, that's what practices are for, to unlock your superpowers. Each person has their own unique abilities. It all depends on what a person directs those released resources towards. Through practices, you can achieve a great deal of power, but this power needs to be applied to something. If a person applies this to some kind of Sith abilities, they will unlock them. If a person applies this, if he has any successful success, he will have this successful success. If they apply it to relationships, they will have amazing relationships. So a person manages this released potential. And of course, yes, there are people in my experience who were interested in their abilities and they directed that released energy towards learning these superpowers. This is a real thing.
Let's move on to the next comment. Soon, the main country will emerge among the nations of the world. Trust in people without borders. Then the world will change. People will find a home and protection, legal status. There has never been such trust in people in the history of the world. Anton, what's your take on this? Can our physical world change enough to become one?
No, it can't, because the rules of the world are set up in such a way that the world will always be divided. As they say, read the Bible. It is written in black and white that when building the Tower of Babel, God divided the people by taking away their ability to gather in a utopia that is in wholeness. Why did this happen? Again, this is the Creator's design, but that's a fact. And any person who in one way or another, I participated in organizing the group and immediately, instantly saw this division. No matter how much you try to mold this group into a single whole, you will see how this group, right before your eyes, is divided into some halos, influences. And this is happening all over the planet. No matter how much a person strives for globalization, no matter how much they aim for a utopia where everyone, for some reason, has received some kind of correct status, it turns out they had the wrong status, but that's a separate topic for discussion. The only status that matters is that you're alive. That's it. You don't need any other statuses. Well, never mind. Such games also have their place, but one, world cannot exist globally. It will always break down into its component parts. These component parts will strive to separate from the other parts. At the same time, from the component parts, like from a Lego constructor, like from puzzles or mosaics, the space is assembled. But each puzzle piece, each little mosaic piece is separate. And no matter how much effort we put into building the limitless, there will always be boundaries. They will just keep appearing because that's the creator's design.
One of your listeners writes, "Hello, Anton. I'm really breathing in your vision, and this video, I would like to come for joint practices and discussions, but your courses are expensive. They are incredibly expensive for me. I haven't traveled anywhere outside of Russia, coming from a not-so-wealthy family. I was upset that your courses are so expensive for me. I don't even have money for the trip. I think rich people are evil. In India, the poor half-naked people somehow practice. Can a person intuitively find their way to where they need to go? I've dreamed since childhood of going into the woods and just dissolving there, to dissolve in freedom and bliss. But maybe I'm just mistaken. Maybe it's just an unfulfilled desire. And I have kids too. 3 preschoolers. One of them is autistic. Take them with you. But they might not experience the joys of freedom and the journey, and because of that, they won't become energetically. Maybe they'll start to eat and then go hungry, and we will have gone far already. I've dreamed since childhood of jumping between train stations to enjoy freedom, naturalness, and sincerity. And now, thanks to your videos, I understand the importance and meaning of this desire. What would be your advice and opinion? Please tell me, Anton. I love you. Anton, what do you think? Can a person intuitively find their way to where they need to go?
Yes, maybe, but for that they need to take action. Sitting on the couch, you probably can't do that. And sitting somewhere in the woods too, because there's a mistaken perception that you can run around half naked in nature and everything will be fine. I was walking this path. I tried running in the mountains of Russia while it was minus 50. The thermometer didn't drop. I tried doing this in India. I've seen all those half-naked people, and I know that it's all just fairy tales, fantasies. And in real life, mosquitoes, ants, and all sorts of other creatures will eat you to the bone. All sorts of other creatures, parasites, and everything that exists in these territories, jungles. So there is an imaginary world. It's very beautiful, I agree. I stumbled over it myself. There is a real reality. This is a gradually dying planet. This is the Kali Yuga. This is when survives the one who knows how to love, not the one who knows how to fantasize. And loving is very difficult right now. It requires certain skills and abilities. And I cultivated these skills in myself for years. And when I cultivated them, for some reason, that idea of running away and hiding immediately disappeared. So, on one hand, yes, it's possible to do it. But on the other hand, well, that's about it. How to win the lottery.
A girl writes about how she dreams and wishes to go into the woods because there she feels freedom and bliss. But she has 3 children, one of whom is autistic, so she can't take that step. What would you advise her?
There is no freedom in the woods. You can't run away from yourself. Just because you move your physical body in space, nothing changes in your soul. So this running away, this escape is actually not a desire for freedom. It's simple. The desire to escape from the life circumstances that a person has created for themselves. Freedom, it's not an escape. Freedom, it's opportunities. And if I try to choose my words as carefully as possible on this matter, I wouldn't even hesitate to say all powers. So, replace the word freedom with all powers. And if a person can't allow themselves something, if they don't have that opportunity, then they need to cultivate that opportunity within themselves. And not to run away, but to actually cultivate. Yes, you can yourself. Put yourself in such tough circumstances that either you act flawlessly or you simply perish. This will allow you to grow yourself very effectively, but this is not about gaining freedom. This is not freedom, it's training. It will be a very harsh and brutal training. You can go this way. There is a way, it is called akoria. The person who is asking me can learn about this path. These are people who choose to deny everything. Exactly. with a bare bottom and through fields, through forests. But honestly, it's better to do this in warm countries, because in Russia, probably even in the Krasnodar region, it's unlikely you could do it on a permanent basis. But there are such paths, of course, and not everyone can endure them. And to some extent, it's an even more complicated path than just finding your place in society. And to gain the opportunities that you want to have, and through these opportunities you gain freedom, this is by no means an escape. I'll say it again so that it's clear. It was clear. The fact that the child has encountered such an ailment only indicates that the commentator probably has too strong a focus on the mind, on that very aspect that constantly speaks to us in our heads. Blah, 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 blah. In the inner dialogue, in thinking, in the endless process of chatting with oneself, if a person doesn't see anything beyond this chatter, doesn't see their own soul, doesn't see extrasensory perception, doesn't see the Creator's design, doesn't see themselves as a part of the Creator, but rather just imagines that I am a part of the Creator, and specifically sees and feels this, then yes, around a person, this process starts to fade away. And children can suffer because of this. I can't say that she is to blame for anything. No, the child came here fully aware of where they are coming and into what physical body. But I can say that she created the conditions for such a child to come into being, so she is not to blame for this. She simply created such conditions, and some part of consciousness chose that body. But the very fact of creating such a condition indicates that the person thinks too much. What to do about it? First, forbid yourself to think. Let it be such an asceticism. I know it's very easy. People take on ascetic practices that are easy for them to follow. Let me do something there. I won't eat meat. I live on 3 kopecks, and you still won't buy that meat. Well, I'm practicing asceticism. There are such cases. How about you stop thinking? For example, you could forbid yourself to think on Sundays. And you'll see how your perception of the world will change. And it will change a lot. And if the person who wrote this comment can realize what I'm saying, not just through understanding, but always through the soul, through the heart, through something deeper, which can be called the subconscious. Understanding to this can be attributed, but one can always realize through soul, through the heart, through something deep, which can be called the subconscious. Where there is no internal dialogue, and this recommendation is followed, then it is quite possible that not only will the question arise, there will be no need to find money to come, and there will be no need to go anywhere. Everything will already be just fine. Especially considering the first part of the question, is it possible to do it on your own? Yes, it's possible, just stop thinking to begin with.
What spiritual practices could you recommend? In this case, how can the girl feel this freedom and bliss?
In my work, there are a lot of open meetings. I give a lot of practices as a gift. Those that are sold alongside the courses, probably more than half, have already been shown at various events that I conduct. These are meetings, online broadcasts, just some spontaneous live sessions. So one way or another, I give these practices as a gift, and just build your skills and experience through the practices that I offer for free. And these are the same practices that are sold in the course. Everything is solvable. You can handle all of this, and for that, it's not at all necessary to run somewhere in the woods without any pants. To run without any pants, somewhere in the woods, no, there's no freedom there. I was there, I ran around there, there is no freedom there. Freedom opens up in possibilities.
A viewer writes, unfortunately, most people don't understand that thoughts and words materialize. Anton, can words and thoughts really materialize in space?
Yes, words and thoughts can materialize in space, provided that the word has value, but not everyone's words have any value at all. If a person lies a lot, if a person pretends a lot, if a person, he is constantly hypocritical, constantly telling some kind of tall tales, his word cannot materialize, it is completely devalued. There's no energy in them. People who have weight, whose words mean something, they have it all figured out. They generally don't ask themselves such questions. To achieve that for yourself, you need to stop lying to yourself first, then to those around you, and that's a very brave act. You become a real person. When you stop lying to those around you, when you present yourself as your true self. But having done this bold act, your word, and then your thought will gain so much, such immense power that it will really start to materialize.
Can you harm another person or yourself with your words or thoughts? For example, curses.
This is also a question about the value of words. If a person curses 5 times a day at everyone, no, it can't be done. It's empty. If a person puts their energy into that word, then with such a word, they can kill. Especially if they do it just once in their entire life. As sincerely as possible, from a state of fire, from a state of rage. Yes, with that word, you can kill. Fury. Yes, you can kill with that word.
But can you heal?
Yes, of course. Any extreme on one side immediately implies the existence of an extreme on the other side. Of course, such people also exist, and they are described in books, and even in modern religions, such people are also described who could heal with words. But to achieve this state, you have to live completely differently. You can't possess such a power while living an ordinary, average life. And many people, realizing what kind of life they will have to live, simply they agree that they don't really need such power. Words, because your life has to be impeccable. It's not even monasticism. This is something much more serious. And reaching such states is not just difficult. Knowing what you'll have to do, you probably just won't want to do it. You'll be lazy, but reaching such states is absolutely possible. This is indeed the case. And even a person who is simply engaged in his energy, simply learning extrasensory perception and gradually transforming his own state into a more powerful, more manifested, more potent one. He starts to acquire this power of words even, not exactly flawlessly living life.
One of your listeners who went through your training left the following comment. Dear Anton, I am very grateful to you for so many sessions. I started practicing more and the results showed up. I awakened my Kundalini. I haven't felt such powerful sensations before. The pleasure is indescribable. Maybe there are some nuances. Interactions with it, I only achieved her response with my prolonged attention. Now there are pleasant tingles around the sacrum, almost always. And as soon as your attention goes there, it just starts to spread throughout the body in everyday life. Bliss. And life became much more joyful for no reason. Anton, could you please tell us a bit more about Kundalini, the energy and the nuances of interacting with it?
Well, a person still... So he studied with me, which means he didn't just direct his attention there, because simply directing attention isn't quite enough. Well then, of course, in my courses, in my practices, there is an exercise for interacting with Kundalini energy. I describe there in great detail how start this dance and don't get burned. What you are dancing at this moment will bend. This process can be quite traumatic if, to go overboard with it, our Kundalini energy is manifested in several areas. And when it starts to spread through the physical body needs to be prepared for the distribution of this energy. That's why we mainly practice with its natural movement, little by little, awakening more and more manifestation. We don't control it, we don't pull it anywhere, and we don't intentionally jerk it around. So we release it, and we observe how it moves on its own. This is the purest, the most safe process. As for further interaction with Kundalini energy, the best thing is to give this energy a chance to release itself, to fill every little cell of the body, to fill every channel, every meridian in the body, to fill the centers of the field. And then live your life in such a way that your body doesn't lose its ability to conduct this energy through itself. In other words, live consciously, knowing that if your body starts to lose the ability to channel this energy, the Kundalini will pack itself back down in the lower part of the spine.
Anton, how will life change after awakening this divine energy?
How will the life of a person change when he starts earning money 1,000 times more? How will a person's life change who has started moving 1,000 times faster? Yes, how he manages it is how it will change. This is a huge opportunity that requires direction towards something, towards some kind of activity. If a person directs this energy into a run at a wall, they'll break through the wall and smash themselves in the process. If he directs it towards creation, we'll build a new world, another one. Not perfect, but different. Everything depends on how a person will manage this released potential. If he manages it with a burning heart, then it will probably lead to something very good, something very beautiful. If he manages this potential with the extinguished heart, then, well, probably nothing good will come of it, neither for the person himself nor for the environment around him. Everything is in our hands. Everything is within our capabilities. And this is just potential, and it is immense in its nature.
Recently, in one of your interviews, you touched on the topic of the terrible period of life that awaits us, to which the following comment was made: "But why scare already frightened and oppressed people with these horror stories? I think the universe is tired of everything old, evil, and negative, and it's freeing itself from it. A new life awaits us ahead, full of love, positivity, happiness, and goodness. The world is undergoing a transformation. For example, a tree. The time comes when a tree sheds all its leaves and new buds appear. But for that, we need a bright mind in our heads. We shouldn't think about the bad and should believe in God, in His power. It's just a struggle between good and evil, and good will definitely prevail. Amen." Is it possible to appeal to the expression, "Hope for the best, but expect the worst"? Or is it better for a peaceful life not to know the whole truth and the truth which can scare?
I believe that we need to ignite the fire in our hearts and live in such a way that this fire does not go out. That's it. All those who play good and evil, all those who manage to fit into one phrase, you don't need to believe in God, and then finish this phrase, Amen. All such people leave me puzzled, but not because I despise or judge them. Because we live in the same space as them and we see the same processes, and no one stops them from seeing the Creator in everything and themselves as a part of it. And what events are unfolding, thus this is an obvious fact. It's already happening. These aren't scary stories. It's not about scaring you. It's not about thinking or not thinking positively. In general, thinking is harmful. If it comes to that, the heart goes cold when you think too much. That's a fact. Why do we need to close our eyes? Why do we need to force ourselves to think about something else? Why is the universe so chaotic? What does Amen have to do with anything? It's chaos. It's chaos that is also an integral part of our current reality. Chaos around and chaos in our heads. But I still suggest we step back a bit from our heads and focus our attention on our hearts. There is a soul there. There is a piece of the original. There is that very support you can lean on in any situation. There will be more and more of these situations now. I keep saying this. We haven't yet gone through that period when all of this reached its peak. Apogee? No, it's only reaching its peak now. And so, if a person has support in his soul, in that particle of the original that is in each of us, it really doesn't matter what happens around. They just observe these processes, and they observe from a state where you feel safe, like being in God's embrace. And when you position yourself that you need to think about the good, this won't help you. That's obvious.
Can fear really create a negative life scenario for oneself, even if it wasn't initially planned?
For you, fear is primarily a process of slowing down. We first create some negative scenario, and then we become afraid. So no, I wouldn't say that fear can be created. Negativity, no. Fear is already a consequence of what you've created. And in general, if you look more closely at a person, you'll find that they lack the instinct for self-preservation. He is not afraid from birth. If you take a newborn animal and a newborn baby and light a fire in front of them, you can't push an animal into that fire. He will resist with all his might, but the child will go there on their own until they get burned. There's no instinct for self-preservation. The same goes for a child on the table and some kitten on the table. Of course, it won't fall off the table, and the child will literally fall off in the next few seconds. We don't know how to be afraid, but we learn to be afraid. And we learn to be afraid when the consequences of our actions come, when experience emerges, when we know a word like danger. So, fear is not what creates events. Fear is what we feel after we've created those events and faced them. These negative events are created when a person's heart goes out. If his heart has never burned, it means he has never enjoyed his life. So, he has never been happy, truly happy, and his whole life is just one big illusion.
Why do the media suppress our will and manipulate people based on their fears? After all, we can create a wonderful, peaceful world. How do we not get involved in this? And how do we protect ourselves from negativity?
It's simpler this way, because when we say the media, we forget that there are people behind these systems, just like us. Yes, they are involved in other things, but they have the same nature as everyone else. And when they find that the mechanism of influence is simple enough to implement, yes, they use it. Why complicate things? And a person falls for such things. He is subjected to such influence, and he does nothing to avoid such influence. So it's very easy to scare and enslave someone. It's very easy to make someone give up their vote. Hoping for the best, I wanted to believe at first to a bright future. Then I laughed at how every subsequent contender for power promises a bright future. I just laughed at it because I lived years. They were counting the votes. I've seen the same thing. And now I feel even sadder when I see once again how another person starts this old tune again, saying we just need a little more time, but then there won't be any then. It doesn't exist, but it's that simple. It's that easy to sway 100 people if still scared. You see, it will already be 70. Yes, there will be some 30 left, but they won't be able to make any decisions because 70 will be on your side. All that we can do if we claim awareness, freedom, and our own will, it's the ability to navigate this reality on your own. To navigate on your own through the space we find ourselves in, to take responsibility for yourself, not for everything around us. And of course, to move with fire in your heart, with love in your heart, and not with complete hatred and rejection of everything that exists. You won't be able to move like that. They will destroy you because you are dangerous, and you will be destroyed not by some higher powers, but by another person. But if you move through the space with an open heart, in harmony with your soul, and at the same time, you don't interfere with others living their lives, which means you move gracefully, then you very quickly notice that even though, no matter what circumstances we live in, and how various systems try to take control, they can't take control over you. You still remain free, and you still don't lose the ability to move, to go wherever your heart desires.
How to open your heart?
Practice, once again practice, learn to do it. To hope that it will just happen now, that it will come down. Yes, it will come down, and it won't happen. The chances of that are like winning the lottery. Practice, learn this. I learned for years, I learned, and now I teach people myself. I'm very good at teaching people because it was very difficult for me. And when I, for example, see a person who manages to achieve in a couple of hours what I achieved in several years, it's cool. It's nice to watch. And this man, further, it will carry this particle, this fire, with the space that will be around it. The more such people there are, the cleaner the space will become. Will there be many such people? No, not many, but there will be, and that's why I'm doing this. I teach people not only about extrasensory perception, not just about developing certain abilities to achieving all sorts of accomplishments. That's also done. But also, I show, teach, and explain the incredible importance of the process called the love of the heart. And the importance of it is not in the fact that it's some kind of pleasure, or that it has to be done, or that it is spiritual development, but in the fact that it is the very cause of human vitality. If a person has a lot of vitality, they can do a lot, what they can manage to do. If a person has little vitality, no practices will help them. It doesn't matter at all how much time you spend on it. I have spent 6 years, or someone else who can handle it in just a couple of hours. It's important for there to be more such people, and a person who he reaches this state, he does not regret for a second after this the time and strength and effort spent in achieving this state, although there is such people who have even spent more time and effort than I have. Spent time and effort to achieve the feeling states of connection with their spirit.
One of your listeners writes, tell us how to become rich and live in luxury, to give back a lot.
Give away a lot, often intensively, and I even put in some effort in this regard.
On one hand, you can hold on to the knowledge that the universe is abundant for everyone, but could it be that the universe intentionally withholds blessings for a certain experience or lesson?
For me, the formulation that someone is not giving us something is meaningless, because it does not correspond to reality. But a person often trips themselves up while moving in any direction. It is impossible to explain this with logical conclusions because there is no logic in it. It feels more like madness and a mental illness, but most people who cannot gain anything in your life, they don't allow themselves to do this. And how? They don't allow themselves to do it. What exactly they are doing wrong? This question can be answered either in individual interaction with a specific person, because each person has a unique experience, and it's not possible to tell everyone why. They don't have it. We take a specific person, examine the situation, and find out why and how all of this is happening for them. Everyone has different situations, but there is a foundation, a base on which all of this is built. This foundation is called extrasensory perception. If a person has developed it within themselves, if a person knows how it all works, they can just take a look. Why? In what specific way does he hinder himself from achieving what he wants? And suddenly it turns out that it's not the universe that's being greedy. He's just reacting incorrectly in certain circumstances. Instead of flowing, he reacts by tightening up, spasming, and closing off. And give it up, he reacts by tightening up, spasming, and closing off. So to lose your mobility? Okay, you could say not to give up, but to keep moving. So to loosen up and start moving, and the person doesn't loosen up. On the contrary, they tighten up and stop moving. That's it, that's the whole reason. Why, from what, how is all of this arranged? Who put this in his head? It doesn't matter at all. The very fact of such a reaction. And this reaction is manifested not only on a physical level, but also on an energetic level. A person who can feel their own energy doesn't even need to see it. They just feel it. He can even see it in advance. The event hasn't even started yet, and he's already starting to fade.
Anton, share from your practice an example of when a person achieved financial success after working with you, after working with energy.
There are many such examples. For example, a woman came to me for individual training who was involved in big business, and she wasn't satisfied with the fact that she couldn't manage to jump on the next one. The level of the top players in the company, that's the terminology. We started studying energy with her. I showed her these processes, how energies move, how to perceive them, how a person is structured, how their nature works, in which parts of the body, what the energetic processes are responsible for. And I suggested that she observe in their everyday life, in their daily routine. I talked about where the energy of will is, where the energy of intention is, how the energy of connection with the soul works, that is the energy of love. And literally, after a short period of time, about a month, maybe a month and a half, in the company she works in, there was a restructuring, a reorganization, and she got the statuses and positions she wanted. And now she has much more rights, opportunities, and freedoms, and she is not going to stop there. She is now gaining experience and skill in all of this. So she already has the understanding, but she's lacking the experience. She's still gaining momentum, and nothing will be able to stop her now. She will be able to lead a new company, to start one, and judging by her conversations with me, she is still interested in organizing her own company now and not trying to get into it. For the position of general director, probably, why not? Yes. So that's all. It's very applicable. And when you see how your energy works, it's really easy to understand how physics works, because energy is primary and physics is secondary.
Let's move on to the next comment. For convenience, I'll split the question into 2 parts. Anton, hello. Thank you for your interview. Very interesting. Could you please comment on the practice of being in the moment that Anna Dreams talks about, and not just him?
If only I knew who Anna Dreams is. And what is this practice of being in the moment? I can say that it's very beneficial to be here and now. Then our resource doesn't drain away somewhere into infinity. It remains in our actions, in our deeds. When a person constantly, if he laments his past, he throws his resources into the trash, because those moments in time cannot be returned. When a person is constantly dreaming about their future, they aren't really living at all. In his life, he constantly swims in illusions. And in most cases, those illusions become so tempting. Why does a person refuse to act and take action in their real life? That is, he loses success, he loses his luck, and he sinks into a sort of vegetative state. In my understanding, being here and now means taking specific actions and making decisions. At that moment in time, when our 3 unities are present, meaning the physical, the mental, and the energetic, when a person acts like this, they, in the real world, in their real life, not in a fictional one, not in the past, but in the real one, they concentrate all their potential. And accordingly, he becomes much more agile, much higher quality, and more effective. He has more strength, he has more opportunities, he has more ability to make decisions, think, tap into his intuition, and really shape his life. When he dreams, he doesn't define his life. And when he laments about the past stages, there is also no definition there. Our psyche easily jumps into the past and the future, but our physicality is embedded in the timeline. And so, a person who doesn't allow themselves to waste their resources on those moments in time where they are not fully present, that person can realize all their ideas, all their plans in one lifetime with a sense of duty fulfilled, step into infinity. If a person is permanently walking somewhere in infinity, then it will be catastrophic for him. It's sad to meet your death. Here and now, he won't have time to do anything at all.
Let's move on to the second part of the question. You've said many times what happens to a person after death if they haven't practiced anything. But what happens when a person who is connected to their flow dies?
A person who is connected to their flow cannot die. We are all connected to our flow. That's the essence of death, that you cut yourself off from your flow. What happens to those who are sufficiently aware at the moment of dying, who know how to act? Who knows what a soul is, who knows what love is, and not just hearsay, who can live like that without love? You won't have any flow, I can tell you that right at the moment of dying. But if a person knows how to live with love in the heart, and unconditional love at that, because obviously conditional love will immediately evaporate, that's it. It won't exist. If you know how to unconditionally, to connect with your soul, feel it, and to hug him after all, not to talk, just to be with them, you argue that at the moment of death, you have the opportunity to not lose your mobility and to once again to enter into the flow already without a physical body. This can basically be done But this is indeed an achievement. It is the result of practice. You need to be able to do this. If a person doesn't practice doing this, that skill won't just appear out of nowhere. So if a person didn't know how to love, if their love was conditional, if they don't know where love is, then they can't be in a state of loving. Bindu in the heart. How does it feel? Where to direct your attention? How to focus your attention on your soul? Where is this soul at all? How to feel it? If he doesn't know how to do all of this, he won't learn to do it at the moment of death. On the contrary, he will panic, and that will be the end. But if a person has already done this throughout their life, as if it were a matter of course, then they have no doubts about it. There is not the slightest doubt about this, not the slightest bit of anxiety regarding it. Yes, at the moment of encountering death, death will. She will not appear before him as something terrible. It will appear to him as a pure embodiment of love. This is not just my own, some descriptions of processes. And this is exactly how it is described in books, in religious books. Death can come as Rama and as Mara. And so if she comes as Mara, then you're in bad shape, you didn't make it. If it comes as Rama, then it's pure love, it simply takes you with it back into the flow. And I'll say it again, this is the result of the deepest inner work. This is the result of a way of life, it's the result of knowledge, it's the result of training. This is the result of how you could live, not without the help of death, how you could live in your everyday life. And this is by no means just a given that we receive. It's all simply because they died? No, we don't receive it. Only as an achievement.
Let's move on to the next topic. Anton, I'm sure you and many of our viewers have heard about numerous cases where a child at a young age can know things that even an adult can't comprehend. For example, there have been cases where a child talks about being a man and having fought, or knows some other language, even though they don't really know their own. There was actually a question on this topic from one of your listeners. How can we explain children's memories of past lives?
Well, not every child's memory is true. This can be said right away. Children have a very vivid imagination. Yes, there are cases when a child remembers very accurately, and that's just an exception to the rule that confirms the rule itself. This is a unique case. A person can return to the flow, but that's not a given. This is his achievement. This achievement will have to be attained. You can't just return to your flow like that, and you can be reborn. I'm saying it again, this is an exception to the rule. And there's another aspect that isn't taken into account, but it does exist. A child can have such a fluid perception at a young age. He can remember being anyone at all. There is only one being that is divided into a huge number of parts. And each part can somehow remember itself as another part, because it's one being. And when a child has a very mobile perception in childhood, for some reason, there are a great many of these reasons, he can begin to remember absolutely real things, some moments happening somewhere, in space or happening in space as if they were their own experiences, their own feelings. But that's not his experience or his memory. He simply reads this information from the informational fields. And when practitioners started studying this question, everything becomes quite trivial. A practicing person, having reached a certain level of fluidity in their consciousness, can even remember being me. It's trivial. A practicing person, having reached a certain degree of mobility of his consciousness, can even be remembered by me. Although I'm still alive, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. But he can remember being me. Why? Because of the fluidity of consciousness. Because we are all connected, and through these connections you can remember anything. And this does happen. And it also takes place. So we have several explanations for this phenomenon. Trivial fantasies unconfirmed by anything. Confirmed real experiences, but that's the exception to the rule. A child's ability to perceive informational flows is often much more refined and clearer than that of an adult. His consciousness is just open. He can read something from there. For example, a trivial situation. A child who has this ability caught a glimpse of a movie where there's a war, and he started to attune himself to those events. And in his consciousness, absolutely real events start to surface. which he might consider to be his life. Easily, and he would even be right, because again, there is only one being. It's simple. It has splashed itself into many components. That's how it all gets explained. And it's unclear which specific case we're talking about, because each case needs to be studied individually. And there's another very interesting point, but this is already in the realm of the modern world, when under hypnosis a person can perceive themselves as anyone at all. They just need to let go of their control a little and trust the hypnotist. And he will sincerely believe that this is his past life or future, or all of that. In reality, it's just hypnosis. Well, that's just a remark.
What does the mobility part of consciousness depend on?
The mobility of consciousness depends on how confused a person is. Naturally, the more we get caught up in our thoughts, the more we crystallize. And the more we take a rigid position, the less mobile our consciousness becomes. It kind of locks itself into those conventions in which we place it. Accordingly, principles are hammered into this position, into this state. Pride, aggression, hatred, malice, grievances. Feeling this fictional sense of justice, even though the world is already just. When you start to feel that the world is wrong, that it should be right, that's also a crystallization of consciousness. No matter how strange it may sound, morality, depending on who means what by these words, but this can also be, it's an aspect of the crystallization of consciousness. So different societies have different moralities. Every society claims that its morality is more moral than that of another society. So these are just certain forms that we trap ourselves in, and then we suffer from these forms. A mobile consciousness has no forms. It moves easily and effortlessly through space. It sees the original intention of the Creator. It sees itself in every person. Mahadeva, it sees itself as Mahadeva. And it sees reality as it is. It's just an infinite number of energy patterns. All sorts of events and everything that can possibly be imagined. All of this is visibility and existence.
The viewer writes, "It's dangerous for beginners to meditate without an experienced spiritual teacher. The soul may not return to the physical body." Anton, what would you recommend to those who are just starting to practice and meditate? Is a mentor always needed nearby?
On one hand, I can recommend not to scare yourself with such horror stories. We are in a very constrained and rigid space. The likelihood of such results in the near future is not very high. On the other hand, yes, that's absolutely right. There is no tantra without a guru. This is what I quote from Manirlan's books Tantra. The text, this, all relates to physical literature, to Hinduism. And yes, any practicing person should have a teacher, a mentor, which knows, who understands this topic, can transfer the settings. But this is not a sentence either, because each of us has a soul inside us, and the soul knows everything. It is absolute. If a person allows themselves to hear their soul, allows themselves to perceive their soul, they quickly come to the realization that it is actually themselves, just in a different state. Here they are in a state of a physical body, and there they are in a state of the divine.
What is better not to do on your own? Are there any red flags?
There are no red flags. It's better to do something and stumble than to do nothing at all. A red flag, if you really want to put one somewhere, is to do nothing at all. In everything else, I say again, we are here with a very low potential. We are very limited in our perception. We are very weakened here. And the likelihood that you'll mess things up is approaching zero. Most likely you will simply begin to slowly realize much more and more deeply the reality of what is happening. And if you refrain from disturbing other people, then no one will even pay attention to it.
If a person has been practicing for quite a while and doesn't see any results, does that mean they're doing something wrong?
That's absolutely right. That means he's practicing some nonsense. Or maybe he missed something in his individual practices and he needs help from the outside, help from someone who really understands this. There are, of course, moments when some things come easily while others just don't come at all. These are the individual characteristics of a person, let's say, some talents. In some things there are, in others there aren't. But if we consider that nothing is working at all, then he definitely missed something fundamentally important. And in general, practicing from books and practicing based on other people's stories is not the most effective method of practice. But what does the person want for themselves? To do it faster and more effectively, or should I push myself to make something happen? Sometimes it's even a question of pleasure. When a person says, I enjoy achieving things on my own, yeah, that will be there for another 10 years ahead. But in 10 years, he'll experience that joy. Why not? Probably, we shouldn't take that pleasure away from him. But there are other people who say they need to do it as quickly as possible. And they are ready for help. I was like that myself. When I tried to do it on my own, it was long, confusing, and painful. And then I found a teacher. I really found one. Everything changed completely. And now I teach myself. How much time would have passed if I had kept struggling on my own?
Thank you, Anton, for the answers. For those who have no practical experience and are just getting acquainted with energy, there is a course specifically designed for beginners, The Power of Consciousness, Practical Energy. We'll leave the link to this course in the description below the video. Make sure to write your questions and impressions. Maybe we'll answer them in the next video.
Do you want to unlock your inner strength and learn to manage energy? The course, Power of Consciousness 1. Practical Energy will provide you with tools to improve health, develop intuition, and gain a deeper understanding of the world. Join and start changing your life right now. Link in the description.